I did a video where I painted my microwave gold, just like some of the elements of it. Thought, oh, maybe a couple of people will find it and think that it's cute. Oh gosh, no. People were mean. There were a lot of people that were like, that is so smart. That's cool. I like it. I also had thousands of people tell me that I was tacky and that I was terrible and that it was disgusting and gold is gross and the 80s have called and it just,
Gold is
I know.
gross. Welcome back to Sprung On Food, an interview-based show where the overall topic of conversation is food. I'm your host, Kae Sprung. This season, I'm talking to food content creators, and my next guest is pastry chef Kelli Marks. Let's get into the show. Kelli is a pastry chef and cookbook author who's been baking for almost 20 years. She's worked in the industry as a bakery owner, restaurant co-owner, and as a private chef. She currently teaches at UAPTC in the Community Education Department with a focus on baking and pastry. Kelli is the winner of the 2023 American Culinary Federation Central Region Pastry Chef of the Year, and her creations have been featured in Southern Living, Southern Bride, Eat Smarter, Soiree, to name a few. Kelli, welcome.
Hi. I'm excited.
Yes, I absolutely love any time that I do get to talk to a fellow pastry person. You've made countless cakes for all sorts of different celebrations, from birthdays to weddings. If cakes were not synonymous with these celebratory occasions, what other pastry or baked good would you choose to take its place?
Ooh, man, that's a good question. I think the immediate first thought is probably pie. I love pie. And pie is so versatile and you can do so much with it. Warm pies, cold pies, cream pies, fruit pies, love pie. But I think my answer would be ice cream sundaes.
Ice cream sundaes. And how would one facilitate? Would you have to kind of do like a bar
Oh
setting,
yeah,
like an ice cream station? And
absolutely.
like, what would you do?
Me? Oh gosh, I would have at least 3 different kinds of ice cream, you know?
And what flavors are we doing?
You have to have vanilla just because vanilla is there. It's a staple. It's a classic for a
Yes.
reason.
Classic. Yes.
Uh, I want to say chocolate, but really, if I did a chocolate, it would be maybe like a chocolate brownie batter, something with an inclusion. I recently stumbled upon an ice cream and I am shocked. I am shocked at how good this ice cream is and the fact that it is a Kroger brand ice cream.
Oh, please share. Don't gatekeep.
No.
What is it? Even though I don't live anywhere near a Kroger, but somebody out there listening
Yes,
does.
it's a brown butter bourbon, I believe is the flavor. I need to go find it. I have a container of it in my fridge right now, or my freezer right now, but it's a brown butter base and it has some swirls of caramel and it has these little chocolate cups, but they're filled with caramel instead of like peanut butter.
Oh,
And that base is so good. Just this brown butter, because you get this nuttiness. It's so rich. It's like a vanilla on steroids. It is so, so
oh
good.
my gosh.
I love it.
Wow. I'm going to like put into Google Maps after this where the nearest one is, and I might do like a road
Yes,
trip
it's
just to try. Sounds incredible. Or maybe I'll make my own. I'm
yeah.
not sure.
Oh yeah, it's definitely worth trying out.
And like, what toppings are we doing? What's
Uh,
included in this ice cream sundae station?
instead of like a hot fudge, I gotta go with like a ganache, obviously. A little bit richer, but but not as thick as like a standard ganache. Some salted caramel, salted pecans. I absolutely adore like a good toasted, maybe sometimes with like the lightest bit of like a candy on the outside of it. They've slightly candied, but not so much that it's overpowering. It just kind of like adds just a little and then, like a Luxardo cherry would be nice. And then just because it's absolutely fine, you got to have like a sprinkle.
Yes. Are we doing, are you partial to any particular type? Like Jimmy's versus non-pearls versus I like weird shapes,
You know,
dragées, probably not
probably not
dragées.
dressy,
Those
too
like,
crunchy.
do you ever get nervous with those? I'm like, they're gonna break a tooth.
Yeah, yeah. I actually found some because there was a while for like a trend with the weddings where there were just so many dragées and you're like, it's gorgeous. But then you're
Yeah.
like, this is not going to be fun to eat. Like,
The user experience is
yeah,
like, well,
yeah.
yeah.
I had one where it was like the cake, like it had this just like swatch that went up huge, and it's just straight silver dragées. Beautiful.
Wow.
But like, so we ended up, I created, like just I took this large piece of fondant and cut it and put the dragées onto the fondant and then wrapped the fondant around the cake so that, and I was like, whoever cuts your cake, peel that off. Do not serve that, so that it was real easy to remove without like just scraping the frosting off, you know?
That's so smart.
But I have
Ah, very clever.
Sprinkle Pop. Sprinkle Pop has started making the larger silver and gold dragées, and they're actually chocolate. So they're like crunchy Rice Krispie inside with chocolate. So they do not hurt to eat them. You get that really large, beautiful dragée without that pain. And then on top of it, they're yummy, you know. So that was a really
Gosh,
exciting
the
find.
innovation. That's what I call using your brain for doing something good for the people, because it's like it's like function meets fashion, right?
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
good
Yes.
choice. Yeah. This is a great assortment because I love your answers too, because you've taken a lot of the kind of classic top of the mind quintessential things but given them each an upgrade
Mhm.
and a fancier version.
Yeah.
So I love that. It's like an elevated ice cream sundae bar.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, speaking of cake, your one of your first cakes was for your grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and you weren't a professional baker at the time, so you went to a bookstore
Mhm.
to go search for a book to find out how to bake this cake. And then flash forward, you have your own cookbook at that same bookstore. Is it kind of a an interesting full circle moment? Did you ever have any foresight back then that you might one day be a professional baker who then also has a cookbook of their own?
Absolutely not. Like, not even remotely. I got into the cake decorating, obviously, because of my grandparents, but when I finished it and I kinda just fell in love with it, so much of it reminded me of my background at that time was art. I loved to paint, draw, and so this to me was just a new extension of all of that. Like, color theory is very important with cakes. I've seen people who are very talented, but, like, the colors are just they're not quite there. They don't match quite right, and it's like you can tell that they don't have that kind of a background, or their lines are not really, straight or smooth, or just, some of the things are off. And I actually, when I had my shop, I hired an artist because she was an artist and she had zero experience in the food industry, but I hired her and brought her in to decorate my iced sugar cookies, and she did an amazing job because I did not have to teach her how to be an artist. I just had to teach her to work with a different, medium at that point. And that was super easy to do.
You know, it's interesting because you're not the first person, and in that exact same scenario, you're not the first person who I've heard to take that approach, especially with sugar cookies and royal icing artistry, because that's really to make royal icing is like anybody can do that. That is very, very easy. But to be able to have the artistry and the piping skills and all of that, that is a skill set. Somebody can be a fabulous baker. They can make the best tasting pies you've ever tasted in your entire life, but they may never ever be able to have that kind of intricacy and flow and just natural propensity to draw like
Mhm.
that. And so that is such a clever way to approach it when you can shift that skill set into something else where it's like, this part I can teach you. Very, very simple. This is the complicated part that is a real skill. And that's where I need your special sauce. Did you kind of tap within your former network of art community people to find that person or people that helped do that? Or how do you go about saying, "Hey, I know you're an artist, but how about painting some cookies?"
It was actually kind of funny. I was earlier today talking to a friend about social media. She was asking me about this interview. I was telling her what I was doing today, and she was asking how that all came about. And I was just telling her all of the different ways that I've encountered people through social media and created these relationships and connections. And so the artist that I hired was actually someone that I knew through Twitter, but was like local. And so I was like, hey, what are you doing? I see your work. I see what you're doing. I was like, come work for me, you know. So that was how I met her.
Wow, I am always so inspired how many people are able to make these fantastic connections with people in their community or mutual followers or just people that they admire and are bold and able to or just have the guts to reach out to somebody because I think sometimes everybody approaches social media differently, of course, but I think that it's very amazing and impressive when people think that this shouldn't be such a, for lack of a better analogy, kind of Oz in Wizard of Oz, where there's this big curtain. It's like, let's peel back the curtain. Like, you're a person, I'm a person, you're doing this. I think it's really cool. Could we connect? And it's so pure. I think that it's an amazing thing to be able to have that access to connecting with people where pre-social media, man, I like struggle to think, how did we do it? It was only like in person, right?
Right.
I don't even I know maybe clubs or groups, but it's all very like location based. You had to show up, you had to be there. I don't know, man, maybe it'll strike me later, but can you think of anything? I don't know how other people, if it was not in person, would there be another way for people to form community outside of that from long distances? I don't even know how they would form those relationships.
Before, because obviously, like the internet really started taking off, and social media, like I think I had finished college right when like MySpace started happening, and
Mm.
so like I missed all of it in college, and like at the very, very beginning of I think of Facebook, like I was out of college, so I didn't have a college email address anymore. So it's like
Oh, right, because that's how it started.
right.
Yeah, you had to have your college affiliated.
Now that we have social media, obviously the Women in Hospitality group on Facebook. And so that is how I got associated with Allison Reedy. She happened to post that she was putting together this cookbook and she was specifically lacking a recipe that was peanut butter focused. And I happened to see it in my feed and I jumped on it and I was like, "Hey, yeah, no, I can what kind of a recipe do you want? I will make you a recipe." And so we ended up talking back and forth and I made this peanut butter pie that's pretty standard, but instead of cream cheese, I use mascarpone cheese in it. So it has like a slightly different flavor. It's not as tangy, it's a little more mild. And we talked through what her cookbook requirements were and that it needed to have a baked element. So I made sure and baked the crust for her and created this recipe. And it ended up in her cookbook, 50 Things to Bake Before You Die. And there's another one, and that one is 30 breads to bake before you die. And so I have a recipe in there as well. And so these are just things that never would have happened. She lives in Colorado. I'm in Arkansas. Like I never would have met this woman. And now we chat all the time and hype each other up on Instagram. And she's really great. But like just pre social media, I don't even know how those relationships would take place.
Right, it opens up such a larger pool of opportunity to connect, and now there's that opportunity to find them, which is it's kind of mind-blowing, it's kind of amazing, and what a world we live in today. I think that talking about social media, I know that you use, TikTok as, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of your main social media platform, is that correct?
Yes,
Or
yes.
do you is it your preferred
It
versus
It has become my preferred. I
yeah.
have my social media channels that I carried over when I had my bakery. I don't have the shop anymore, but I kept all of those established because I had like 6,000 people on Facebook and maybe like 2,000 on Instagram. Not huge by any means. Like
Listen, 6,000 people, you put them in a room, that's a
Well,
lot of
true.
people, you know? That's a lot of people. You've gotta have a really big room for
Right.
that. So, it's certainly not nothing.
I feel like I use the different channels for different reasons. My Facebook page, I tend to now promote my community education classes there. It's just a really good place that, during classes, I tell people, hey, go follow me, keep up with what's happening. I'll put my schedule out when the semester starts. Also allows them a really easy place to reach out to me. So if they run into problems later with anything, they can message me there. And it's super easy for me to just get back to them. So I like that channel for those purposes. For TikTok, I'm able to show a lot more of what's going on in my life, what I'm working on. I do a lot of recipe creation. Sometimes it's going through different steps. I've got playlists for obviously, my baking, some savory as well, just a little bit. Cake decorating. I have an entire playlist for wedding cakes and showing people like how to stack cakes. It's really great that all that stuff lives there, and I try to keep it very organized. For a while, I was doing, 1 or 2 videos a week. I've pulled back, depending on how busy my life gets. I sometimes for a while in my head, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't posted." Somebody's gonna be like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "It's okay. Nobody cares where I am." I'll just post when I've got stuff that's actually worth talking about?
Well, that I mean, yes, that for mental sanity, that's absolutely the way to go. Let's say, for instance, you were posting a couple times a week, and then there are moments when you scale back. Do you personally see any shift or change or drop off or plateaus in engagement and following, or it's really not that serious?
I've kind of gotten to a point where it's probably not that serious. There were for a really, really long time, I had hardly any followers. Like I would suddenly get a notification that somebody watched a video and I was like, ooh, this is so exciting. And now, every time I log on, there's probably like 15, 20 notifications. I do find obviously I get more comments when the videos are new. I'll get like that burst of that kind of engagement where people are having conversations and asking me questions on the newer videos. And the older videos, I'll just get likes. So I'll see that people are still liking stuff. I have videos that are 1 year, 2 year old that are still showing up on people's FYP that get engagement. The advice and the things that I'm putting out, it really does vary just because of my background. Obviously, I've owned a bakery, so I understand what it's like to be a small business, the trials and tribulations that come with that. Also, what it's like to be a scratch baker working with very large volume. So I have a lot of information that I can share on that front of things. And then just because I've ranged from like everything from cookies and recipe development with my cookbook to, wedding cakes where it's more elaborate, more detailed. And now that I have gone through competing for Pastry Chef of the Year, I have some information about competing and what goes into that. So my videos, while it's sort of focused, like there's still a wide range of information that I'm sharing. One of the videos that I still regularly get a decent amount, it is surprising because this video it must be hitting the target market so perfect. This is a video that I created going through an Excel spreadsheet that I created to track your costs. And so,
It's so helpful to people,
yes,
though. I understand why. Yes,
the
continue, but I already am
yeah, the
understanding.
first page goes through and it lists like every single ingredient that I used in all of my recipes. And then you break it down by like how it was purchased, what the cost was. And unfortunately at the time, I worked in cups. All of my recipes are in cups. So it's done in cups. I need to recreate the whole thing by weight. But that's your first page. And then the second page, it's all of my recipes broken down. And then it pulls in those costs. And then, so like you can calculate. So if on the first page, if suddenly the cost of eggs goes up, you just type in that new price that you're paying for eggs and it repopulates every single cost for you so you can see in real time how your costs are changing. So I had that spreadsheet and I put it out and showed people and I was just like, hey, here's this idea just to kind of like, if you don't want to go out and try to buy some kind of program like that, you can create your own in Excel. And so, people started asking, do you mind sharing it? I'm like, yeah, no, here, just DM me your email address. I'll mail it to you. So I email it. I mean, I get a request once or twice a week. People still ask me if I can share it with them.
Wow.
But then if you go back and look how many views that video has, like it's really not very high. Like it might have 10,000 views, if that. It's hitting a very targeted group, but those people are responding to it very well.
And that's your audience. And then what I think is clever too, because for a moment, I do believe in good karma and giving back and things like that. But sometimes, if there is a way to monetize something that's mutually beneficial, I say to do it. And so when you said you will just give it to them, and now granted, it's not their exact
Sure.
ingredients necessarily, and it's not going to be the exact prices, but you've kind of like done a lot of the
Mhm.
legwork for them. So the fact that you did it for free is so kind of you. But then where I was like, aha, whether you thought about this angle or not, I was like, you are collecting their emails. So you do have their emails on like a list for whatever, a newsletter or
Mhm.
whatnot. And those are always valuable because then you'll always have somebody's contact. And it has to be their real email. It's not a fake
Right.
one because they need to receive the information. So in a way, excellent marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you think about it like that, I'm
Yes,
assuming,
after
or
a couple, I
yes.
was like, "Oh, I can start," because that is one of the things that people, especially when they started talking about banning TikTok and what's gonna happen, there were a lot of people who rushed to say, "You need to be collecting email addresses," because no matter
Mhm.
where your audience goes, no matter what the social media du jour is, if you have the way to reach these people directly, you're always gonna be able to communicate with your audience.
In this current landscape that we're in right now, the email will always be a surefire way of connecting back with certain people in your audience and
Mhm.
directly, right? Because even if you gain a follower on TikTok, that doesn't mean they're going to see hardly any of your content unless they're continuously looking back at you, or your particular videos just keep coming back up in their feed at the front, because maybe some people only spend a couple. I know people spend way more than a couple minutes, but some people might only spend a couple minutes here and there. And if your video isn't the one to come up, then they may not see you for a while. But if you're emailing them directly, they're going to definitely hear from you. So I think that that's very, very brilliant. And you are doing a service to the baking community too, because there are, and rightfully so, there are a lot of creators or bloggers out there who have their own kind of spreadsheet out there that they will you can buy, customize it, and maybe it has some other supportive documents and things like that, and that's great. But I think too what you're doing also is helping to build and foster that community, and it doesn't feel transactional in that way, which is, also I think what you do a really great job with on your channel is it feels completely, and I know that it is authentic. It's you. You are showing up in a very honest and real way. When you started posting content on social media, I know that you said, initially it wasn't gangbusters, but was that kind of always just your natural style to just show up as you? There's no gimmick. You're just there really for the education and sharing, which I think also goes hand in hand with what you're doing now too in teaching. Was that kind of the driving force and the passion behind a lot of the videos that you created?
So I started my TikTok account when my cookbook was coming out. The publisher kind of had some different plans and stuff as far as like how often I need to be posting and some of the different things. And so I
Oh.
joined TikTok to share some of the recipes and just kind of show some of the book. I love the cookbook that I was able to create. It's called Easy One Bowl Baking. It's like 60 no fuss recipes that are just super simple, but really delicious. They're not basic. Even though the equipment is, parsed down, you're not making as much of a mess.
Which is a
Yeah,
win all
definitely a
around.
win, but they're not simple. You know, I feel like sometimes when you get into these like easy cooking things, the recipes feel stripped down in a way
Mm.
that ends up making them very flat and very
Ah,
one note. You know, you're like, sure, you can make a quick cookie, but like after, and you don't make a giant mess or anything, but when you're done, you're like, this wasn't even that great.
right, like, where's the reward in
Yeah,
it? You technically did it, but is this something
right.
memorable that I'm gonna, like, want to make again? I think that that's kind of, in my mind, the hallmark of a great recipe is one that you say, "Wow, this was fantastic. I want to make this again."
Yes, yes. And so that was my goal was to keep these recipes to feeling fresh, feeling fun and a little bit different, but still very approachable. And so one of the things about my book that I didn't maybe love was that it's a paperback and we just don't have as many photos in it. So you and I'm we, you know, when it comes to baking, it's like you want to kind of see that finished product to say, oh, okay, this is what I'm making. Yes, I can do that. Or maybe that one's outside of my scope or not what I'm wanting to do today. It just kind of helps put your mind in a direction. Also, you know, if you see something and it's beautiful and looks delicious, you're like, yeah, I got to have that. And sometimes for especially for beginners, just looking at a title and looking at a list of ingredients, like I can look at a recipe. I've done so many now that like I can just scan it and you're like, okay, I know what we're going for here. I know how this is going to, I can envision what it's going to look like in the end. But somebody who's just beginning maybe doesn't quite have that skill. So using the video and then sharing that stuff on Instagram and Facebook was really great to kind of get more of what you could expect to see out of the book in front of people. So that's how I started the account. And somewhere along the way, I began sharing some of the stories that I had from my bakery. And those honestly have gotten some of the most traction. I think, you know, there's like a whole chunk of TikTok that is just like, you know, customer interactions or, you know, these like Karen stories and people people like to hear those.
Listen, people come for the tea. They really do. I think that that's a huge, maybe it's just in my For You page, but it's people are captivated, or maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. I haven't done the analytics. I don't work for these companies. I couldn't care less. But a lot of these are very story driven, one on one. I'm here with you, talking from my phone in my car, casual. I'm on my bed telling you this story from the day, and people love
Mhm.
it. People love it. They have no idea who this person is. They have no idea who the person is that they're talking about most of the time, but they just, maybe it's, what do you think it is? Is it just like the human connection part of it? Is it just the gossip that doesn't directly affect your life that's just fun to hear? Like what do you think that it is that drives people into that?
You know, I think it is the harmless gossip, you know, is kind of
Mm,
fun. Also, you know, anytime you start to pose these situations, you get people who are like, "Oh, I would do XYZ." Like you start to put yourself in the scenario and you're like, "What would I do if I were in that position?" You know, if somebody said that to me
right.
or if somebody did that to me, like how would I react? And then you just kind of start to get into that human nature of things of like I don't know. So it's fascinating, but I did start sharing some of those stories and that is where I ended up having to do a two-part story because this was back when you only had 3 minutes and it was kind of a complicated story and so I ended up telling, you know, so it's 2 parts, it's like 6 minutes to get this whole thing out. Where the shortest version is basically I took a very last minute cake. It was fairly expensive at the time. It was like a $400 cake. They paid half. I go and deliver it. They refused to pay the other half because they claimed that they didn't like the cake, even though obviously they had ordered the cake like 3 days before for a 3-tier cake that fed like, you know, 150, 200 people. So obviously it
Wow.
wasn't that important to them. And I did not back down. Instead, I took the cake back and I gave them back their deposit and I walked away and then I donated the cake to a charity instead. I was like, I would rather give this cake away to a charity than let somebody have it who I felt was trying to take advantage of me. And that is really where my follower count just shot. Even though those 2 videos, I think the first one had about around 600,000 views, and the second one it got fewer views, still maybe around 2 or 300,000. That is where I jumped to about the follower count I have now, or pretty close. So,
Wow.
like, I think it jumped me up to around 30,000 followers on TikTok, and since then I've collected maybe another like 7,000. And it's very odd how yeah, I just plateaued right there. I did have another video go really viral because it got about
Okay.
3.4 million.
Wow.
A lot of views, but oddly, that one did not translate to as many followers.
Okay. And why do you think? What was the content of that particular video?
So oddly, that video was I had replied to somebody who follows me, and I was talking about the stacking system that I use in my wedding cakes. Somebody had asked me, they were like, okay, so how do you stack your cakes on site? And I was like, well, I have this really large spatula that I use. And I was like, I've got a wedding coming up. I'll show you. I went through and just, I talked over this video of us stacking the cake, and then I showed the finished product. And goodness, it took off in a way that I hadn't really expected. It's very wild with social media, especially on TikTok, where it starts out showing it, oh, to people who know you, and then it'll show it to people who it's like, oh, they like this kind of content. That's great. And then it will hit a bubble where suddenly it's just being shown to people who have like no interest in this kind of thing. And once it gets outside of that circle, it can get really ugly really fast.
And is that what you
Um,
experienced?
it did not get as bad as a different video, but it got kind of bad.
Oh,
And you have to be okay with like, and I feel like a lot of people on TikTok you just have to block people. You have to block them, you have to delete the comments, and you just have to like move on. Some of the videos can some of the comments can get really harsh for no reason. Here I am trying to educate. I'm showing I'm like, I'm giving you some education here. Somebody has asked for this information, and I put it out and was like, hey, here's how I stack these cakes. This is the way it works. Here are the products that I'm using, and the steps that I take and all of that. I'm just trying to educate. And, people are coming along, and I I had to block the word gloves because so many people got
ah,
angry that I didn't have any gloves on while I was stacking this wedding cake. And it was so frustrating. If you are somebody who works in the food industry, you immediately know why I don't have gloves on. But if you're somebody who has never even considered any of that, you just see it, you immediately think, "Oh, dirty, dirty," and I'm like, "It's nothing like that." Okay, it's
and it's because you had the big spatula that you mentioned,
exactly.
right?
So
Like you're not touching the food, you are using a spatula to mitigate that. So that is permissible. That is
exactly. I
okay.
was like, I never touched the
Yeah.
cake. I was like, and part of the reason that, people will or won't wear gloves is because like, cross contamination when you have gloves on can be a problem because there is this like mindset, oh, I have gloves on, this everything is clean now. And that's not the case. You've still touched something and you can still transfer it. And in this particular case, if I were to have gotten buttercream on my fingers, I wouldn't be able to feel it. And if I put my hands down on their beautiful linens, on their wedding cake, I could stain their linens, and I wouldn't even be aware that I've done it. So for me, it is more important to make sure that I am not transferring and messing up stuff because like then they're getting into issues of like having to pay deposits and and the fact that there's like a stain on their beautiful wedding like on their table. There are reasons where for me it was more important. Now sometimes depending on what I'm doing, oh, I definitely have gloves and I take them with me and I will use them, but in this particular case I didn't need them. But that did not stop a million people from commenting, where are the gloves? And so I was like, I'm not even going to have this conversation. So I just blocked the word and moved on because I didn't feel like having to explain myself 1,000 times.
Yeah, and thank goodness for that
Hmm.
feature too, honestly, right? Like what a great feature to be able to block that out just to say, guys, read the other comments where I do respond to this because there is a
Mhm.
reason. And also, man alive, the crazy things that I have firsthand seen with the comfort of having gloves on for some people, thinking gloves, now everything is safe, where people will be touching the food and then like scratch their face
Mhm.
or like fix their hair with the glove on. And I'm like, if you don't take that off
Yes.
immediately, this is all null and void right now. Like, so there is that spot, but somebody just in a fleeting moment were to walk by that person and be like, "Yes, excellent job, you're wearing gloves," and then 2 seconds later they're scratching their head, and I'd be like, "Bleh." Like, So there's that. So sometimes there is that absolutely. That, listen, I'm a huge proponent of wearing gloves with food handling. Absolutely, 100%. But there sometimes can be, exactly to your point, that false sense of security or the potential downfalls. And you've thought, it's just like people come onto the internet, and like you said, it's kind of breaking through a threshold, a barrier of audience that typically is not your own. They're not familiar with your page. They don't care. They don't know. They're seeing it in a fleeting moment, and then comment, bomb dropped, scroll on with my day. So for them it's like whatever. I know you mentioned the two videos that did reach a very broad audience. If something like that happens, or when it did happen, does that deter you in any way from continuing to post your regular content, or to post a video explaining something that somebody asked for? Or do you just say, whatever, I'm going to block you and just keep it moving? How do you kind of handle that?
The very, very first video I ever had, like, reach a wide audience was actually not really baking related at all. It was I kind of after I was promoting my books, I kind of just started doing, like, a lot of whatever in my life because I didn't have a ton of followers. I was like, screw it, just throwing stuff out there." And I did a video where I painted my microwave gold, just like some of the elements of it. I bought a microwave and I painted it gold. And I bought some new kitchen equipment. I bought a new oven and a new refrigerator, and they were pretty expensive. And the microwave that went with the set was like $1,000. And I was like, I can't pay $1,000 for a microwave. I'm just not going to do it. Like in my heart, I can't do it. And so instead, I found one that had a similar handle design, but it was all silver. And so I thought, buy that. I'll paint it silver and paint it the gold. And I think that microwave was like less than $100. So like the investment was not that big of a deal, and painted it, whatever. Thought, oh, maybe a couple of people will find it and think that it's cute. Oh gosh, no, people were mean. And honestly, I kind of had never experienced social media quite on that level of just the comments. And there were a lot of people that were like, that is so smart. That's cool. I like it. I had somebody who actually ended up buying the exact microwave and painting it and doing the same thing and then tagging me. So that was really cool. But
Wow, that's amazing. You inspired them so
yeah,
much. That's
but I
amazing.
also had thousands of people tell me that I was tacky and that I was terrible and that it was disgusting and gold is gross and the 80s have called and it just
Gold is
I know it
gross.
just
What? Excuse me, but gold bars are known to be like a very sustainable form of currency. What do you mean gold is gross? Get out of here.
but like to have so much vitriol just directed at you from strangers is a wild experience that I don't know. I take a lot of things very personally, and so, like, when I say that I was plunged into a depression for about 3 days, I am not exaggerating. Like, it got to the point where I was kind of scared of my phone, I didn't wanna check this stuff, but also, like, I
Oh man.
couldn't not go see what somebody has written, you know? And there was even people, like, they got into just arguments of different stuff. Uh I I I had somebody say, ask me, "Oh, what is like the rest of your house look like?" And so they were like, "Oh, can I see something else over there?"
You're like, you're not allowed to
What
see. You're not allowed to see.
they were nice. I was like, "Okay." So like I did this
Oh,
little like,
okay.
quick tour. We have our great room. It's like
Brace
one big
yourself.
room
Yeah.
together. Well, that because it was tied to this very viral video, it also got a lot of views.
Oh.
And that was fine, but then, like, it sparked this whole debate between probably about 5 or 6 people on whether or not my style was mid-century modern or not, and what
Oh
like,
God.
which they're having this
What?
discussion, but then they're like fighting each other. And I was like, Jesus, you guys got to call. I was like, okay, you're all gone. You're all gone. I'm sorry. I can't have this. But if you can handle that kind of thing, it's wonderful because like your interactions, your traction, all of that stuff just goes through the roof. Because if you can choose to ignore a bunch of strangers fighting on your page, it's just going to help your
It builds
views.
your
Yeah, your
engagement.
engagement is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Right. It makes me think of like the scene from Mean Girls where you're just kind of observing just all of these people, well, all of these girls fighting each other and just going crazy. It is kind of the wildest concept to me. Not, I mean, I can imagine it, but I could never participate in something like this where you do see somebody say something in the comments and then some other seemingly respectfully random stranger responds to them, the other person doesn't like it, all of a sudden they're in a combat, somebody else sees it and they're like, my opinion matters in this situation, I'm going to join in too. And then it just is one big wrestling ring of seemingly stranger random people around the world just all coming to your comment section of a video. It's such a harmless video that's not offensive,
Yeah,
that's not bad, not mean, so pure, probably so I'm gonna have to check. Did you take the video down or does it still
it still
exist?
exists. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check it out because it's probably beautiful and gorgeous and inspirational and give somebody some creative license to do a fun DIY project on their own. And then people have the audacity to take it to this other level that is just absurd, not realizing it would be like the weirdest example that I can think of is somebody doing something benign, nice, whatever. And then random people start coming over to that person's house and dropping notes at the door or putting sticky notes at the door, like with their opinions about it, and then just driving away
Yeah.
and never returning. And it's like, and then that person has all of these notes and collections of items that they're there and they're like, the hell do I do with all of this? Like, why? What's the point? Like, people don't think this is going to somebody. You are putting it on their space.
Yes.
Like, what?
That
Ugh.
that one is the other part that is really weird about videos that get that much traction when that audience reaches a point, and I don't know when or where it flips, but when my videos go to a smaller group, people talk to me. They're like, "Hey, I'm gonna ask you a question." But when it hits this tipping point, they start talking about me. And they'll be like, "Oh, did you see this? Blah, blah, blah. She said yada, yada, yada." And like they'll talk about me and
You're like,
I'm
I'm
right
here.
here. Like I'm still getting this comment. Why are you talking about me to you're talking to me. I can read this still. And it's very
Yes.
odd how I don't even know why people do it or like what the mentality is behind it that they switch from talking to you to about you when those videos hit like a certain point. It's it's very bizarre.
It's the same thing that people do toward celebrities, public figures who also have social media pages. And yes, there are some celebrities who do not run their own social media page. Sure, that happens, but a lot of them do. And people just think sometimes if it's a big enough video, if people have a certain amount of followers, or if they're a known celebrity, they're not going to see this. And there have been so many prime examples where people have clapped back and been like, answered the person, and then the person will quickly come back and be like, "Oh my God, I love you. I never thought you'd seen this." And it's like, shut up. I have in black and white the first comment that you made, and it was not nice. And I had to respond to get you to take a step back. And there is this weird sense of anonymity, which also is strange because you have a username and it clicks back to a profile. And whether that's private or not, okay, fine. But some people, it's even more bold when people have public profiles and they go dropping all of these horrid comments on people's things. And it's like, we can find you, like you've just left a paper trail. Why would you do such a thing? And what does this do for your life? And yes. So it can become a very strange and mysterious place. But overall, I think the content that you are providing in the community that you have is essentially what I think social media is great for. You have a playlist on there as well for your pastry competitions, and you just recently completed that too. What goes into a pastry competition, and what got you interested in doing something like that?
Well, I mean, I'm just a wildly competitive person as it is. I just I like I like
Fair.
to compete, and so around this time last year, the local ACF chapter had their pastry chef of the year competition, and I had not entered before, and I thought, I'm going to enter and just see. This is like a whole different kind of baking. This is a very fine dining baking. I mean, it's really just a different level that I was not familiar with, and I've kind of gotten a crash course in it over the past year, but I did win at the local level. I got a gold. Regionals was in April. I flew to Michigan, competed there, and ended up winning again. Did not do as well. I got a bronze. I messed up a couple of things. I left the sugar out of my curd, so I made this what could have been a detriment. Yeah,
Oh,
it could have been a detrimental
wow.
mistake.
How do you recover? Yeah.
I happened to look over and I just see the sugar sitting there and I was like,
You're like, you should be in this and you're
"You are
not.
not there." And so I just grabbed all my stuff back out, splashed a little water in the pan, melted the sugar down, made a simple syrup, threw the curd back in there, cooked it again, reduced it, and
Oh,
then just put it back in. And I was
clever.
able to fix it really easily considering when you go into the kitchen, all of your ingredients are with you and they're pre-measured. So like they will allow you to bring
Mhm.
a little bit of extra, like if you need flour for like your bench, for like rolling things out.
Oh, but if you miss something or mess it up, it's like
You
you're
don't have
done.
any other, there are no, you can bring in like whole fruit. So you might have a little bit of extra fruit to play with potentially, but
Wow.
outside of that, like it's not like obviously the sugar was left out. It's sitting right there, but I didn't have new fruit juice or any, cornstarch, nothing to start the curd from scratch. I had to work with the part that I'd messed up and then the sugar getting it back into it. So I was able to recover that pretty well. It did set me back on time a little bit, and so I had to make the choice to leave something off of my dish, but I also calculated, I was like, "Okay, I will lose points potentially for not having this, like, chocolate accent on my plate, but if I go over, I know that I'm gonna lose a point for every minute." And so I kinda
Oh.
calculated, I was like, "I think that this could cost me anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes to, like, melt the chocolate down, get it bagged, get it on the plate, and then all of that." So I thought, "You know what? Just gonna take that hit, risk it," and I ended up beating the other girl by, like, 4.5 points, and so
You
I
made the right
I
choice
I I feel
then.
like I made the right choice.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah,
Wow. Trust your
yeah.
gut. Yeah.
So, then I went on
Incredible.
to nationals, and the girl who won, she got a gold, and she did really, really amazing. I ran into a little problem with my dry ice. My stuff didn't set. I had to get all of my equipment out there in carry-on bags, basically in my luggage. And so I did not have the same ice chest that I've been working with practice in my practices. So, you live and you learn. But, when I went into the critiques, they were like, your demeanor in the kitchen is just so calm. You are just very focused. Even when I had that setback, like you can see that my husband caught a clip of me where I'm, like, just kinda looking at my hands because 'cause they're covered in chocolate, trying to, like, reshape my molded mousse, because, like, I could just trying to get them out of the molds. They weren't unmolding because they were not solid. And so I had to, like, on the fly adjust some of the things that I had planned, but, that's just kinda you deal with it. So, anyway, I did place 2nd. I got a bronze medal. So, of according
Incredible.
to this organization, I am the 2nd best pastry chef in the country, so I can't feel too bad about that, especially considering this is
Kelly, you cannot feel bad about that at all. That is so incredible, so amazing, so much to be proud of.
And it was a fun experience, and I got to challenge myself, and I think honestly the part that was probably my there were two moments that I will probably carry with me after it was all over. My husband, he had came with me on the trip, and he walked up and he's like, "God, that was so intense." He's like, "I don't even know how you did that. Like all those people were watching. Like what the, like the fact that he got to see me in just a different light. Obviously, he's always there, helps me with like my wedding cake deliveries and stuff. So he sees a lot of the behind the scenes, but he's never seen me in this kind of environment. And so I just really appreciated seeing his like awe in it. So that was cool. Another part when I was going through the critiques, one of the judges started asking me some questions. He was talking about my packet, and he said that he could just see the passion that I brought to the project, and just how I'd laid everything out. And so he was just so impressed with what I'd done. And so that like he started to get choked up. And that really like touched me that he was so choked up over my passion. I just thought that was really amazing.
That's so special and so beautiful. And it's amazing too that your husband was able to see that really unique side to what you do. And the fact, my gosh, that you placed the way you did is so incredible. And congratulations. How can people follow and support you? Plug away.
You can follow that Facebook page and my Instagram. Those are both Sweet Love Bakes. It's all one word. And if you want to check out those TikToks that we've been talking about, you can find it at Kelli_Marks and just jump on a playlist.
Kelli, thank you so much for sharing your story and spending some time with me here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. You can find links and more info in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. See you next time.